Oh, right on. I better behave now. So in this instance, I have a plan that has been created already that I've been working on. So I'm just going to go ahead and open that plan in a separate tab. And so from Jira, this is pretty much Jira Advanced Roadmap. I haven't applied any filters. I did enabled a function that I shared last week. I'll do it again just for the benefit of those who may have missed the session. If you are using Scrum in your teams and you have sprints, and the sprints, as you all know, they're based on a start date and an end date. Jira Advanced Roadmap has this roll-up functionality that if you're using Scrum framework, it rolls up the activities from the sprints and releases automatically for you. So all these Gantt chart, the groovy looking Gantt chart view that you see up here, is really, you don't have to manually enter it in order to populate this information. It's actually Jira Advanced Roadmap just rolls that information, smart enough to just grab based on not the epic, but the stories as they relate to the sprints that they are assigned to, which is kind of cool. You can develop very quickly a Gantt chart view that could be shared to people outside of your team, the VPs, the directors, that they really care to see the time horizon in terms of where are we in progress in the overall picture, not sprint to sprints, but in the terms of the release level, right? And the blue line here representing the milestone of the release when we are going to market with this fake project or product. So that's just a quick glance overview. For more details about more powerful functionalities, feel free to review the video or ask questions during the session. So I'm going to shift my eyes every now and then to my other screen because I have my little bullet list of topics that I want to cover with y'all. So I want to make sure I'm covering all of them. So the first thing I wanted to cover, and again, feel free to jump in if you have any questions, is clarifying the scope of work. So for example, in this, and by that what I mean is clarifying the scope of work is when you have a release. If this is a small project, it has only 22 epics, but if you've been using Jira for a while, you'll have a project that has hundreds of epics, if not thousands, right? And so if that's the case, you want to have conversations about your next major release or the next release that your team is working on. You don't want to see all the cluttered data that is not relevant to that release. So if you're tagging stories in Jira or in Jira Advanced Roadmap using the fixed version field, you can then come into Jira or Jira Advanced Roadmap in this case, and the releases under the filter options on Jira Advanced Roadmap without having to learn to do JQL. Releases is the same as field as the fixed version field in Jira. You can select the fixed version for the release that you're trying to focus your conversations around. In this case, I'm going to pick out of it. This is an aggregated view of multiple teams that I created. I'm going to just focus on the Optimized Agile team. And I'm just going to pick on the Q2 release. This team releases in this organization, they release once a quarter. And in this case, this is for the Q2 quarter. And they use that fixed version. The team agreed to use that. So this is, you have to create all that fixed version based on conversations you have with the team. And the team is disciplined enough to tag all the stories, bugs, tasks, everything else with the fixed version, so that when you apply the filter, you are getting the exact content of the work. And then also you get some orphans being issues that are not bound to any epics. And if you recall from last week's session, if you are the PO or the engineering manager or an engineer and you realize this story belongs to this epic, rather than going to Jira and opening the Jira ticket, fish for the epic link field and type in the epic number, you can drag and drop stories, and that will bind them to that epic. So you can declutter a lot of the stories that are orphan, and therefore all your work really maps to this work belongs to this feature. Therefore, when you're looking at the Gantt chart view and the timeline view at the feature level, you can see the traction of progress of that feature as the yellow line gets closer to the blue line. Yellow line meaning it's today, and it moves automatically forward. And that is one way of tracking progress, and knowing how much work needs to be done by just hovering over the progress by issue count field here in my fields section. And again, we spoke about how to populate these fields in last week's session, but if you care to review that again, feel free to raise your hand and I can revisit that topic. So the theme here is that for this to work very effectively, and this is true for most of the tools out there, the team has to have and develop the discipline of ideally creating discrete epics and that are meant for specific releases, and tag those epics and the stories, the artifacts that are associated with those epics for that release with a consistent fixed version, right? That's key. That way you can apply the filters and you get all the content that is really relative to or related to that fixed version altogether. Now, one of the things that I noticed some teams leverage Jira Advanced Roadmap is, for example, Jira planning. And I am going to make a claim. I'm not suggesting that it's a good practice or a bad practice. I just seen the practice in the field. And that is that several teams out there, they created sprints way in advance, right? So rather than having 2 or 3 sprints or the current sprint plus 1 sprint in the future, some organizations encourage their teams to create a lot of sprints, right? As in the case of this sample here, where I'm in Jira and I have my active sprint, and then I have a bunch of sprints into the future. You could use Jira, as you know already, by dragging and dropping stories into a sprint, or simply just right-clicking and adding stories into a sprint directly from Jira. But when you do it in the context of this view, more often than not, people lose perspective as to the major milestone that you're trying to attack or complete, meaning the release milestone or feature complete milestone. Your Advanced Roadmap, since it's showcasing or displaying the milestone here on the far right, the blue line, it allows you to identify any potential errors when you're doing sprint planning, for, as in the case of if you're trying to move way into the future beyond the milestone. An example of that would be when we're doing sprint planning, we are not looking at epics. So I'm going to take the hierarchy field, and I'm going to restrict this view to story or story level issue types, right? That could be bugs, tasks, stories, or any custom issue types that you create out of the story construct. I've worked with organizations that they create a dependency issue type. There's a custom issue type because they are integrating everybody into Jira, but this organization have many teams working with using other tracking tools, and they're slowly rolling them into Jira. Some teams are using Azure, version 1, Raleigh, and because Jira does not talk to those other tools, this one organization decided to create a dependency issue type. So if they have a dependency on another team that is using, for example, version 1, so they create that issue type in, or that ticket in Jira to reflect this work that needs to come from another team. that is not using Jira, and that way they can track it in their plans. So Jira will support custom issue types, and that's the theme that I'm trying to relate. The other thing that you will do in the sprint planning is that you will also be more than likely working with things that are not assigned to a sprint, right? If it's assigned to a sprint, it has been pre-planned or planned already to be slotted into that sprint. So therefore, by clicking on this checkbox, notice that I'm not writing any JQL. Notice that my list in the background has shrunk dramatically. So I'm using the fixed version. I am tracking things that are not part of the sprint. And now here I have a list. In this case, it's a fairly small list that will show me if these issues happen to have subtasks, it will show me progress of the subtask underneath. But it will show me, for example, the issues, who they are assigned to, if they are having a story pointed. So when I'm doing sprint planning, not only I can assign them to, in this case, I only have one user. This environment is my environment, so I only have one user enabled, one seat of Jira Premium Editions. I can also have conversations during the sprint planning session about the story point sizing. So for example, Raf here, and notice that I can update all that information within Jira Advanced Roadmap. Again, for sprint planning purposes, this is kind of groovy that you have all this information in a row rather than having to fish that information in the UI in Jira in the ticket. The other part that is kind of cool too, powerful enough, is the dependencies. So for example, we talked about the dependencies in the last session, where you have the ability to see incoming dependencies, meaning I am dependent on another team, which will be reflected in the incoming column, and outgoing dependencies, meaning another team is depending on my work from my team. And the benefit of that is that if you're planning on this, resolving this bug here, and you have a dependency, by clicking on it, you can see what the dependency is, the type of dependency, if it's a benign or a crucial dependency. In this case, this is a crucial dependency. It's a block by. A benign dependency will be something like it's related to, right? Which doesn't stop you from doing the work, but it's related to something else. So you can see what the issue, and that is linked to the issue. So if you want to open it in Jira, you could do so by linking on it here. You can see who owns the dependency, what is the status of that dependency. So if I'm doing sprint planning, and my goal in the sprint plan is I'm committing to work on that ticket and finish it during the sprint. Before I commit to finishing that ticket, in this case scenario, I will reach out to the lead engineer or the engineer here, in this case Raf, say, hey, I'm planning on working on this story, but it's in the to-do state in your board. Do you think you're going to be able to complete it on time? What's your plan? And so you can have conversations about timing. And if the person says, no, I won't be able to do that in the sprint, it will be in the following sprint, great. I can stack rank, just like you can do in Jira. I can stack rank that story down below, so that it takes a lower priority than the other stories that are at the very top, so I can continue to do my sprint planning and then my top stories. Likewise, somebody has a dependency on you, they will reach out because this one story is blocking this bug, and I can reach out to Raf. In this case, everybody in this organization is called Raf. That's a hiring requirement, and you can have conversations on letting Raf number 2, hey, I'm about to work on this story, just to give you a heads up. So in case you're planning on working on it, I'm blocking you. Likewise, you have the ability to look at impediments, which is a powerful feature that I leverage a lot in Jira. So impediments in Jira are flagged in in the form of this little flag here. As you well known, you can add the flag and then you can add a comment to that flag. And the cool thing is that it shows in the backlog with a highlight. So it tells you, hey, I got an impediment in this ticket, so let's visit the impediment before we commit it to a sprint. But you have the same functionality in Jira Advanced Roadmap, and you can take it a step further, where you can apply a filter, such as the flag filter, to really show you the impediments that filter and show you only the issues where you have an impediment on. So you can then focus the conversation, narrow it against those issues only. I'm going to remove that flag for now. Also going to talk about the fact that you can create custom custom fields in Jira. And as long as it's not a multi-line field, like the description field that has multi-lines, single text fields, which actually can hold a lot of data, are supported in Jira Advanced Roadmap. And so I created this flag summary, which allows me, or allows the engineer that is working on this ticket that found the impediment, to articulate briefly what is the impediment about. So whether I'm doing sprint planning or whether I'm in a report, status report meeting, I can talk about things that have impediments, and this will give me a clue as to what the impediment is, right? So in this case, there's a spike that has to be created, some research that has to be created to integrate this credit card ticket in with the processor of the credit cards. And so, again, another powerful feature when you're doing sprint planning, because you don't want to take an issue into a sprint that cannot be completed, not because the engineer cannot do the work, is because either they have a dependency on somebody else, or they may have a flag, a risk to that completing that issue that has to be revisited. So it flags those things, and you can actually review them within Jira Advanced Roadmap. That said, let's assume that we have enough information. This is assigned now to Raf, and I want to assign this ticket to a sprint. I can do so from within Jira Advanced Roadmap or from Jira. There's no exclusivity here. But the cool thing about Jira Advanced Roadmap that exists is that let's say we're talking here and we're talking about the amount of work that the team has right now, and we decide we want to assign this ticket to sprint number 23. Great, not a problem. It's assigned. It drops from the queue here because I am applying a filter that says just show me tickets that do not have a sprint. So therefore, the moment that I assign a sprint, is smart enough to remove it from this queue, that quickly. The moment that I assign this here story, for example, 65, into a sprint into the future, notice what happens to my fixed version. And this is where I was drawing the comment about doing sprint planning right from Jira, that you lose context of the milestones of the release, unless you have very good memory to remember that, hey, the release ends at a certain date. It's hard to keep track of all that information from this view. However, from Jira Advanced Roadmap, here's your milestone. So you have a visual cue. And I'm going to extend here my date here so I can see it into the future a little bit further, into October. Great. And so the moment that I remove this flag that I want to see all my issues into, so basically whatever sprint these are based.
Hey Ralph, this is Suruchi. I think
Yeah.
Marco has his hand up. And
yeah.
Hey, Ralph, would you like to take a couple of questions before we go deeper?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would that be great? Because we have a couple of questions on the basics at the beginning.
Okay.
One of them is from Navya, who says, please share an example on how Jira is used as a now next, and later product roadmap. What kind of suggestion would you give in having a now, next, and later product roadmap?
Now, well, the suggestions that I would show about the now, next, and later, the best way to accomplish that, as I work with organizations, is leveraging the fixed version field with that level of discipline where you can track or tag the now, the work that you're doing for the team and for the current release. Let's say next is my queue for release, for example, in this case scenario. I can then, if things are tagged correctly underneath, meaning at the team level, I'm going to take my 2 teams, and this Q2 represents the now. Right now, this is the current release that we're working on. For the next, then I can do planning with the team and say, I want to see the work for future releases. So in my case, I only have 2 releases, right? So I'm just going to untag Q2 and I'm going to tag Q4. Now, this is my next release. And now I can see the epics, the features are assigned based on planning sessions that have occurred, big room planning or PI planning or release planning, whatever format that you choose. Using the fixed versions with discipline, you can actually then tag and filter for those artifacts. And for the future, the same thing, right? You have fixed versions that are created that represents future releases, and you leverage the fixed version, and then you can use the filters within Jira Advanced Roadmap to show that in the context of a timeline, right? So in this case, I'm using the Q4, and because my custom date is, let me just expand it a little bit more so it includes Q4. You'll see the fixed version is right here, blue, in my far right corner. Just need to expand it a little bit more, and you'll see that now is showing me all the features in the context of where they are. Some of them were in progress, perhaps they are punted from another release and that they were not completed, but there's some work underneath that has occurred. Some of them are orphans that need to be mapped, and a lot of them are in the black, meaning the to do. Does that help? Hopefully that helps.
Navia, hopefully you can actually give us a message about that, if that's answered your question. I must admit, Ralph, that the actual fixed versions, the versions management screen is much better handled in Jira Roadmap, being able to actually assign them quite easily, because it's kind of like a bolt-on thing that was added to Jira, and you have to go to a separate window and then work everything out and then try and remember where you were. So this is great. I also noticed that the actual flag and comment, and you said you used a custom issue, a custom field. You created a custom field to be able to actually align that in your actual dashboard here, such that you could then actually give a reason instead of just leaving a comment, which could be actually lost somewhere in all the millions of comments on a ticket. So great ideas there. We have another question, if you're ready.
Ready.
Yeah. Navia also asked the question, story, incident, bug should be assigned to sprint during sprint planning. What do you think? Is that something that should be done using Jira Roadmap or in your practice?
It depends on which of the 2 tools you feel comfortable with. I'm showcasing Jira Advanced Roadmap to illustrate that you don't have to go back and forth between 2 tools. And so if you grow familiar with Jira Advanced Roadmap, there's a lot of activities that you can do here and do updates. And then when you feel comfortable, send those changes by clicking on the, let me just go a little bit slower here, by clicking on the review changes button. And when the pop-up occurs, it gives you a summary of all the changes that you have done, including the specific fields and the values that have been changed. when you feel comfortable, you can click on the Save Changes to Jira, and those changes will replicate to the Jira instance that these issues belong to. Or discard the changes if you feel uncomfortable. So if you grow fond of using Jira Advanced Roadmap, which I mean is there for you to use at no additional cost in the Jira Enterprise Edition, you can do that work here. If your preference is to do it in Jira, you can do it in Jira as well. And just know that if you do it in either tool, Jira Advanced Roadmap will pick up the information, so they can collaborate with one another. So you pick your poison. I'm just trying to showcase that you could do things in one tool or the other, so that you don't have to feel constrained into, oh, I got to go back into Jira and do certain things. So that hopefully that helps as well.
Yeah. Navia, if you can actually give us some feedback on those answers, and in the meantime, Ralph, take it away. I think we have another question.
Sure.
But I think it's a bit more a deeper one, so maybe we'll hold on to that one until we get to a bit deeper things. Okay.
Okay. That sounds fair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for, and please feel free to give me a visual, a verbal cue if there are questions. I go into autopilot and I forget that, hey, there are questions out there. My apologies. So I'm going to go ahead and clear my filters here, because I want to showcase, picking up where I left before. So notice that when I was doing my sprint planning, I put some things into a future sprint, and now I have a risk, and the risk is showing in Jira Advanced Roadmap in the form of my fixed version. One of my fixed versions, I have two of them. The Q2 and the Q4 is red. So so the next question is, hey, why is it red? So we got a root cause the issue, right? So now this is a simple project here. I only have a few epics. But if you are working in an enterprise project, you'll have a lot of epics and a lot of stories. And so a root cause in something becomes looking for a needle in a haystack. So I'm going to apply the filter here so that I can restrict my view to the Q2 release, which is my current release for the Optimized Agile team, which is where we're doing the sprint planning. So now I have the few epics that belongs to that team in the context of that release. And I can see the one epic that is exceeding my fixed version marker. So out of all the epics that I have, I can detect that OCT1 needs to be analyzed, or root cause, to find out why is it breaking my fixed version, or raising a flag rather. And so by expanding the epic, by clicking on the chevron, you see the stories and the story level artifacts, whatever custom issue types that you have that are of the story construct that are associated with this epic will show here. And I can see that I have this one issue that is exceeding my fixed versions. That's the reason why my release is at jeopardy. So I can have a conversation as a team and decide, can we pull that story to an earlier sprint? Or we need to, right? Because otherwise we're not going to be able to complete the release. Or can we punt that story for a later release, in which case I can change the fixed version right from here and associate this to a different epic that is associated with the new fixed version. But let's say the team decides, hey, we can actually pull that in. Let's see what the velocity of the team, let's say for sprint number 23 is low. And the engineer agrees, I can do that in sprint number 23. Great. We'll put into sprint number 23. And this is a quirky thing. Sometimes your Advanced Roadmap on the cloud updates this in blue. Sometimes you have to refresh a screen. I guess it depends on the bandwidth. And so you will note or notice that because I moved that story to an earlier sprint, now my fixed version turned blue. So, and what I'm trying to illustrate here is that your Advanced Roadmap gives you a lot of very meaningful warnings that allows you to kind of de-risk or prevent issues with your releases when you're doing sprint planning. And also the fact that you are able to edit a lot of the information for the tickets, have a lot of information regarding any dependencies or risks that are being flagged directly from your advanced roadmap, and edit those comments or those fields. So from the sprint planning perspective, a lot of people who use Jira natively, they are so accustomed to it, they have no issues. They'll continue in that journey. And some of the folks who have adopted Jira Advanced Roadmap, they realize, I can do more than just planning. I can do, like BRPs, big room planning. I can do tracking, but also I can do planning sessions at the sprint planning level. Now, another activity that occurs, and this one I have witnessed with a lot of tears in my eyes, because I go like, why, oh, why do you guys do that? Is backlog refinement. I have seen product managers, and this is really a Scrum Master conversation here, release managers, but usually the Scrum Masters are in that room where they're doing backlog refinement as part of the conversation. And so they may be driving Jira for the conversations between the PO and the engineering manager as part of the pod, right? So what happens here, pivoting the information into, or the conversation into the planning sessions, is that when you're in Jira, when you're looking at the backlog, you cannot sort the priority field. And so a lot of the product or POs, product owners that I work with, they end up exporting the data from Jira into Excel, cleaning up a little bit, end up with the fields that they care for, then sorting so that they really want to refine the tickets. If they're leveraging the priority field in Jira, the highest priority tickets first, then the second highest priority, and so on, right? That's a pain, to export the data into Excel. So when I showcased that in Jira Advanced Roadmap, you have certain fields that are sortable, and that's showcased by this little arrow associated with the field, then I get a lot of, I make a lot of good friends when I show them, it's like, don't export into Excel, just go into Jira Advanced Roadmap and just click on that arrow. Just by clicking on that arrow, now I have all my fields, all my stories that are prioritized or sort by priority. Now, so the next thing I need to do is have the right fixed version. And again, when you're doing backlog refinement sessions, there are two things that occur. You don't have epics because you really are focusing at the story level issue types, right? Because you're working with the backlog. And also, you have things. Let me just showcase that in Jira so that it makes sense. My next comment. Things are in the sprints. They have already been planned or refined. They are prioritized. So therefore, they are assigned to a sprint. So the backlog, the other nuance that it has is that these issues, they don't have a sprint associated with them. Again, I'm going to the sprint filter, and I'm going to tell the tool, just show me stories that do not have a sprint assigned to them. And so therefore, this is the same backlog that you have in Jira, but shown in Jira Advanced Roadmap. Because I can sort, if this backlog was meaningfully, considerably bigger, just by clicking on the sorting arrow, now I can focus my attention into, let's just refine based on the highest priority tickets down to the lowest priority tickets. And so usually this actually wins the team over considerably. And then you can start refining, having conversations about, oh yeah, we have dependencies. Let's just, during the backlog refinement sessions, refining the story points, taking a look at the multi-line fields. You are not supported in Jira Advanced Roadmap, so you cannot see the description in order to see the acceptance criteria and the details of the stories. But at the very least, from here, I am clicking the control key in my Windows machine, and I can open the ticket because it's hyperlinked. And so the ability for me to discover, open the tickets, look at the descriptions if there's any meaningful description here, looking at the acceptance criteria as well, and making sure that everything is clear and the team understands it during the backlog refinement sessions. It guarantees me that my backlog is properly refined. I was going to say the old word, properly groomed, but that's not a PC anymore. Just know that you have the ability to do the sorting and do editing of most of the fields, with the exception of a few fields, such as any multi-line fields, like the description fields. So before I keep going to my bullet list, any questions, or am I good to go, Mark? Okay, all right. So I'm gonna, if any of these things that I'm saying, clicks, hits a needle or something that you just remember, feel free to jump in or ask a question.
Okay, let's go through a couple of questions, Ralph.
Okay.
What is the best approach to handling a RAID log in Jira? This question comes from Hanu, and he actually adds, would creating a specific issue type for RAID be a good approach?
I guess I will need to understand what is the context of RAID.
Yeah, I think if Hanu, if you can add some information as to what a RAID log is.
Thank you. Good morning. RAID log is risk, action items, issues, and dependencies. So many times as a program manager, project manager, along with Jira, we will be using multiple tools, all this information in multiple places. Since it is part of the same project or program, so is there an option to create issue type as a RAID log? So all the items related to dependencies, issues, action items, or risks or assumption can be part of one place instead of because I used to manage multiple tools. Smart Sheet is one place for managing them. Excel sheet, the information is everywhere. So that is taking a lot of our time as program managers and Scrum Masters. That's the question.
Yeah. Great. No, thank you for that clarification. I know if your organization creates I guess the quick or the right answer, without knowing a lot of the details, it depends on the culture that your organization needs and the practices that have been accepted within the working agreements of the teams. If you happen to have the need to create an issue type called RAID, and you could create that issue type called RAID and then manage the process, and then Jira Advanced Roadmap, for example, will look at that issue type like any other story level construct issue type and bring it in, right? They will bring the information in. What I would suggest is that explore because I know that you mentioned you had some questions about the dependencies. Explore the ability to create dependencies within, just like you can do in Jira, within JAR. And the reason why I'm suggesting that in the context of JAR is that I don't know if you were here last week, but let me just step back for a second. Here, I'm just going to go into the plan settings, and what I want to disclose or describe here is that my plan view, rather than being a single project, and therefore I have to create a way for me to track dependencies across not only my team but across different teams that may be collaborating in the same project. JAR has the nuance or the benefit that you can actually aggregate multiple projects and multiple boards and multiple filters. So basically if you're working with 5 teams, you can actually add those projects from the 5 teams into JAR, and now you can see the data from the 5 teams using Jira Advanced Roadmap. So it becomes an aggregation tool. And so once you add those issues, the issue sources into JAR, the advantage here, and this is what I would suggest you explore, this actually has taken a lot of burden from similar scenarios in some of the teams I have worked with, is that if I have a dependency that I want to call out, I'm just going to expand this to epic to stories. Heck, I'm just going to go all the way down to subtasks just in case, because I do want to showcase something, is that if I happen to have dependency, I'm going to open this ticket here that has 5 dependencies. Just by that clicking on the down arrow, I can see that I have dependencies, and notice that the dependencies here are across the 2 projects that are built to make this view, right? So you can actually, as long as you have access to those Jira projects, you can actually have inter-project dependencies called out and using JAR. You could do that in Jira as well, by the way. But JAR, it seems to be a little more cleaner because all the information shows up in a row. And by clicking on that dependency down arrow, you can see all the dependencies across different issue types and across different projects. So there's no restriction of having, for example, in this case, I have a subtasks that is part of a dependency to a story, but I can have just as well a subtask or a story be a blocking issue, right? Or is dependent on this epic. So there's really no restriction for you as a program manager or the engineer or the product manager to be able to actually call out dependencies between issue types and across projects, as long as those projects are part of your issue source. So therefore, you don't have to have multiple sources to track information that lives in different projects. Actually, you can use JAR by aggregating all that data and calling the dependencies in Jira Advanced Roadmap. And once you call out those dependencies, let me actually just showcase again that functionality. Let's say I'm just decided, having conversations now, this subtask is blocking this one epic. I'm going to click away. I have my epics. This is an incoming dependency, meaning I'm depending on it, versus an outgoing dependency. And if I'm okay with all these changes, I can then save these changes into Jira, and that dependency information will be then replicated into the respective Jira projects. Otherwise, if you realize, that one change only, those 2 changes were not good, you can actually just deselect everything, select those 2 changes, and discard them, so that it will not delete any issues. It will just discard that change that you made. So you have a lot of flexibility to make dependency callouts using Jira Advanced Roadmap, and then showing them here as well, right? Including in the timeline views, it will show the dependencies, the incoming and the outgoing dependencies. So Hanu, hopefully this helps. If you care to connect via LinkedIn, we can actually go offline and deep dive a little bit more after the session, if you care.
Thank you, Ralph. Definitely.
Thank you.
Great point you made. Thank you very much. I think based on my understanding, even though if you are managing multiple projects or programs, we can aggregate all of them and we can create consolidated view of these dependencies, right? Number one.
And then you have to add me to your Christmas list, because I have lessened your pain and suffering.
Karen, you have your hand up. Is there something you wanted to add?
Well, Ralph, you are a true wizard, and I am not. I do organizational change management, and I've started to see Jira and Confluence experience like 6 years for organizational change management. And I was wondering, where do we fit in? Have you seen OCM resources in your project and how they helped? That's my question.
I have. Unfortunately, this here project is not a good project for me to to showcase some of those. And the only reason why is because this is a one person license, which is me. The moment that I add multiple users, to showcase some of that functionality, then Atlassian is nice enough to charge me, a seat per person. Because I don't have an enterprise license, but I mean, I would love to chat with you if you care for after the session or offline at a time that is convenient for you, to understand what exactly organizational changes that you're tracking and you're trying to manage. Is it just the resources or not? But there's value in using JAR to do some of that, and it allows you to map based on teams, for example.
Thank you. I will reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. I just again, I mean, this is unfortunately, for example, just to give you an example, if I have this group by functionality and some folks use this, I could group by teams if I have the teams all line up, or I can have my resources here and I can assign those resources to a specific teams. And I can even, and I know this is outside of the scope of organizational changes, I can even move around and assign workloads based on, for example, if I have 5 users and I have one user who have only 2 stories and everybody else have 7 stories, I would not assign things automatically because these 2 stories could be long poles. But I could talk to Raf and say, hey, Raf, Mary and Joe and Charles have a lot of work. We're still under the velocity. Can I assign some of this work to you? So it's meant to be a conversational tool, actually, to raise those things out. And then if they agree, then you can drag and drop stories that Raf says, yeah, I can take that story from Mary and this story from Joe in order to balance things up. So maybe not be the organizational changes that you're looking for, but know that there's a way for you to actually club this into individual resources and know where those resources are, how they're distributed, and how much workload they have. Again, we can talk offline if you're interested.
All right, would love to.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
We've got some. Thank you. We have a couple of other questions as well, Ralph. This one's from Tristan. Is there a way of configuring without showing the time on the roadmap? That is like the example, like the quarters on the roadmap. He's asking this question because he would like to get people away from fixating on dates. Is that something possible?
It could. I don't know if I'm going to be answering the question correctly. So feel free to jump in if the OP, the poster, wants to jump into the mic. You could literally just set things by quarters if you don't want to see specific dates. But if you just don't want to see the timeline view altogether, I believe if you click on the list up here, this is a function on the cloud version. It depends on what version you have. If you're using the on-prem version, which is the server edition, versus the cloud version, you have a Jira Advanced Roadmap in both. If you have the enterprise license, it so happens that the cloud version has the latest toys that Atlassian is making available. And notice that when I have this button that I can toggle between the timeline view and the list view, if I click on the list view, the timeline view element goes away, and then I see all my artifacts here again by applying the filters, but without the timeline view, right? So and that would be one way that you could work with the tool without seeing this time horizon view. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, thank you, Ralph. It's mainly to do with the idea of understanding a commitment. So we're in Q1. If I put down something in Q4, it's obviously quite a long horizon. I would far rather just say, "Oh, that's happening later. Things might change."
Fair.
So it's the best way to communicate that, rather than that's communicating to stakeholders rather than seeing particular views or Gantt charts in plans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that you could also leverage is again, with the filters, you can restrict not showing things in the future so that people are not stressing about time commitments into the future. But again, I mean, if you don't want to see that Gantt chart view, if you go to list, and let's say, for example, you decide just to focus the attention in the current release, or if you want to include both releases, or remove the current release and just talk about the future releases. Using the filters, in this case, I click on the list view and the Q4. I am seeing now the payload that is associated with the Q4 release together with the epics. If I happen to have any initiatives that are associated with that, it will disclose there. Epics and stories are underneath as well. So hopefully that helps. Tristan.
Cool, thank you.
Okay,
Awesome.
great. Thank you, Tristan, for adding that. We have another question from Navya. In Waterfall, there's a document called RTM without the F, which is Requirements Traceability Matrix. You know, the one where you have the specification numbers and then the requirement numbers, and then you get down and you start tracing all the documents. What would be a way to build and get similar information on Jira, starting from initiative, which might be the highest level, till the smallest requirements incident level traceability?
I will dare ask the audience, has anybody gone through that journey here before?
I have.
Okay, what would be your suggestion?
I've seen a team use them with issue types and using issue linking. And then obviously they need a plugin for actually doing some kind of tree. I can't remember what they were called because it was so long ago, but I've seen that kind of like dependency being created from tickets that don't go into sprints, but are actually traced and documented, and then maybe even actually exported onto Confluence.
That's a great answer. I thank you for sharing that, Mark. So, because I was going to allude to something similar. Notice that in this project of mine, I have this concept of initiatives. I have worked with organizations that they create different custom issue types that live, above the custom issue types that you see in Jira. So meaning whether it's a custom issue type called feature, initiatives, themes, concepts, depending on what are the needs of your organization. If they want to articulate business level goals and objectives that are not really constructs of a release, they live for a longer duration than a release. You could create custom issue types, and in Jira itself, you can actually map the hierarchy that this particular issue lives under. For example, if you have an issue type called theme, right, higher than initiatives altogether. OKRs is an example. I have seen organizations that create a custom issue types to keep track of OKRs, and OKRs sometimes they can be OKRs are very team execution specific, and there are OKRs which are organizational specific aspirational goals. And so that will be one way of mapping those OKRs or documents, as in specification documents that are at the higher level, into those higher level issue types, and keep them out of the noise of sprints or any activity that occurs every 2 weeks, because they don't get done in every 2 weeks necessarily. Hopefully that gives some ideas. By the way, without having to buy plugins. I mean, you could do this natively with Jira and using Jira Advanced Roadmap just to show the hierarchy and the connectivity. Because when you're creating those issue types in Jira and you're mapping them in the right hierarchy, Jira itself, via the parent link field, allows you to connect that, for example, the OKR to the themes. And so you restrict that they are only able to click to, for example, to the concepts only. So you will not be able to create an OKR and map it to a story, right? It will be using the parent link fields. So, but I digress. I'll stop right there before I get into too much of a confusing topic.
No, that's fine. I think that's most of the questions that we've got.
Okay.
There was one that's embedded somewhere, and I just found it. Is it possible for us to request read-only access to the optimized agile plan in Jira so that we can use a demo hands-on to get a better feel of how JAR works?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, not out of the optimized, because this is there's only one user, and there's not a way for me to share. If we were part of an organization, I could go into the share button up here, and then I could send you a link of this plan, and it would be a read-only link, which is kind of cool because you'll be able to see all the data live, right, based on the activity that is occurring underneath. Which is, I was going to showcase this later, but since it's mentioned right now, which is useful when whether you want to send it via email or whether you want to embed that view. Let's say we're all working together and I have a Confluence page where you can discover my project status, any summary, but also I can embed that view using either the iframe macro or using the advanced roadmap macro in Confluence in a read-only mode. So you can get all the latest information with regards to the progress, activities, the status. This will be updated every time you refresh this page. If there's any changes underneath in the project, it will just bring up that data. So it's not like a PowerPoint presentation that you have to refresh it every time you want to present it. This is actually constantly being updated. You just got to refresh the page. But the caveat is we have to be in the same domain, in the same environment. I cannot send it to you via to your Gmail account. And if you're not part of my company or my domain, you'll be able to open it. So I wish I could do that. But otherwise, you can actually ping me and we can schedule a time where I can just, I've done that out of some of these JAR sessions where I sit down with teams just to showcase directly from my instance, just like we're doing today. And I'd be happy to do that for you. So just reach out to me via LinkedIn and we'll be able to coordinate. Oops, there you go. Are we good? Should I continue with?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I see any other questions, I'll let you know. Awesome.
Sounds great. So I'm looking at my list here. I don't have much more to showcase, but just a few more things. I already got ahead of my own list and talked about the flag field. When I work with organizations that are using Scrum, which many of them, or status meetings of some sort, the flag field becomes a very powerful conversational piece, because now we start the conversations by talking about let's talk about issues that we have impediments on in order to make the teams productive. And you, in the Scrum, sometimes you bring the teams, or at least the leaders from the teams that are collaborating together. And now notice that by applying the filter that I just applied, just show me things that have impediments. I have shrunk my list of epics. Now, these epics are grayed out for a reason. And that is because the filter that I applied, in this case, the impediment filter, is not being applied at the epic level. However, there are children underneath the epic that have impediments. And therefore, it brings those epics in to show me these three features have impediments. Here are what the impediments are. And if the engineer was savvy, it would have include a flag summary, which is a custom field that I created to hold the text, right? A blurb that says, so therefore I don't have to have a sticky note that talks about this is the impediment associated with the story. No, I let the engineer who knows what the impediment is firsthand, just put just enough data that we can talk about it without disturbing you, without taking you away from your work. Your manager, the engineering manager, can speak about this issue. So for example, here in OCT 59, I have an impediment, and that the pen testing team is not responsive. So I can escalate that during the meeting, the SOS meeting. And if the pen testing manager is there, then I can assign this issue to that person upon agreement for them to drive into their team, right? This is a read-only view. That's why it's showing me that X that I cannot do any changes. So let me go back to my. Oh, that's a good showcase. In the read-only view that is embedded into Confluence, you have access to the filters as well. So you can modify the view that you have here, but it will not save any of the changes. So that's for the Confluence embedded version. So if I go back to my live or read version, so again, I want to apply the fixed version. So we are talking about issues that are associated with my latest release. And now I am able to see from epics down to the stories, the same information. And so if the engineer adds the comments, then you can have productive meetings where you can just pick up from that comment. Notice also that I put some things in Spanish so that people don't feel like this is only supported in English language. It's whatever languages are supported via Jira. You can actually add the comments there. So I have teams in Central and South America that are using JAR furiously in order to collect this data. Now, this data really lives in Jira. Jira Advanced Roadmap picks it up. Again, if you want to make some changes here, you could do the changes here, and the tool will keep track of those changes. And then later on, after your session, you can then save those changes back into Jira. So again, you can modify things with the comfort that you're not changing automatically while it's in Jira until you click that save changes. Unlike Jira Align, which is another tool from Atlassian, where usually it's customized to auto save. And so if you made a change in Align, guess what? If it was a mistake, that mistake went back into Jira. Here it gives you the ability to say, oops, no, that I didn't mean to do that. So I'm just gonna not save it. And so therefore you save your hide, if you will. But the theme that I wanted to highlight is that by using the filters, you can have Scrum meetings that are very meaningful by talking about things where you have either impediments and or issues. You can use them in combination, not exclusively, but you can also focus on issues that have dependencies, right? Or overlapping date, whatever the dependencies are. And again, the goal here is to really succinct or bringing about the data that in the context of, these are things that I have dependencies on. And maybe there are things that are part of my active sprint, right? So I want to talk about those things first and foremost. So there you go. And so we can actually have the SOS where we're actually talking about these are the dependencies. And then I can reach out to the Rebel 2 team manager, which should be in the SOS, and say, I am blocked by these dependencies. What is your plan of your team to do work? Because I reached out to Raf and he never responded to me. Right. So you can use that to have, not escalations, but in meaningful conversations about how do you unblock the teams from moving forward using your advanced roadmap to showcase that data. So I'm putting hopefully not a gun, but give you ideas as to collaborating. It's not meant to be punitive. I showcase I'm going through my list real quick to make sure I don't run out of time. I showcase the grouping functionality, the grouping function here, where you can group by assignee, by themes. And a lot of folks, they like to group by assignees so that they can see in the context of the active sprint. Gonna remove this here. In the context of the active sprint, they can see, for example, how the team is distributed. The workload is distributed across the team members. Unfortunately, in this case, there's only one engineer, which is me. But if I have multiple engineers, they will be listed here, and then you can actually, by clicking on the chevron, you can see the amount of work, and even review the story points with the engineers. Accordingly, the priorities. All these fields are editable, so it helps managers kind of like marshal the team and make sure that the work is balanced. It's not about the number of stories; it's really about the story points and the sizing of those stories, right? How complex they can be. Moving right along, really quick here. Covering the dependencies, making sure. A quick call out on dependencies. Hanu, you may want to, if you decide to explore this tool for dependency tracking, there's a caveat here that I should raise up as a Scrum Master or program manager, or project manager using the tool, is that in some organizations I work with, they have dependencies like a list of dependencies that they had created over the history of using Jira that is just phenomenally big. I don't know why that happens, but it happens. Jira Advanced Roadmap will support all the dependencies that are in Jira. By default, it supports only three or four native dependency types. Any custom dependency types that have been created by the organization through time as they use it, there is a configuration table in Jira Advanced Roadmap, if you have access to set the settings, where you can actually add those dependencies. So literally all the dependencies that you have in Jira can be supported via Jira Advanced Roadmap. You just have to add those dependency types beyond the native dependency types there. So it will support those custom dependency types in JAR as well. So you can make dependency mappings across the different organizations and with truthfulness, if you will.
Yes, absolutely, because Jira actually doesn't really give you much with regards to actually creating that structure. You can create those dependency types and in the two-way sense, but there is no relation between all of them. So between each other ones, apart from just saying a different set of words. So that's great. So you can actually configure that even further within here to give them more sense.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We've got about 5 minutes left, Ralph.
Okay.
What would you like to do now? Would you like to take questions from the audience? Because I think I've got maybe Ange. Did you spot any questions that I missed out?
No, I think you covered them all.
Wow.
Somebody was asking about SEUs, but I think that's not something Ralph can answer.
I even answered it directly to the person. Yeah.
Okay.
So would you like to do, Ralph? Would you like to actually use this 5 minutes for another little bit of more stuff to share with everybody, or would you like to take some questions from the audience live?
I'll showcase just and there were three things, but I'll showcase one thing that I keep forgetting to showcase.
Go ahead.
In previous sessions, and then from there I'll pause and we can take random questions. And that is, I am here in my left pane view where I see my Jira artifacts, and what I wanted to showcase is that from Jira Advanced Roadmap, you have the ability to do bulk editing, just like you do directly from Jira. So for example, here I have the epic, right? By clicking on the three dots, let me just collapse all these issues, collapse. So now I can see only epics. I can say select this and all the descendants of this epic, right? So basically if I click on the chevron, I notice now that all my stories are selected. And to the comment that was made earlier about being able to map things into like fixed versions and or components, the bulk actions in Jira is very powerful and easy to use for that. So you can actually call the bulk actions directly from here, and or simply there are these pre-created fields. So if all you're trying to do is change the release fixed version for all the issues that have been selected, you can just click on select, click on the right fixed version that you want them to move to, and commit those changes and apply them, and voila. But if the change that you're trying to do as a bulk action is not defined in these pre-selected bulk moves, you can call from those selected issues directly into the Jira bulking. And if you just want to change all those issues without going by one into any of these fields here, right? So you want to assign them all to Ralph because you just want to drive him nuts. You can do so from here, assign all the issues to Ralph via the bulk actions in Jira in a single swoop, right? So you have to click, go one by one and get, a large muscle in your finger by just clicking back and forth. So the bulk action is available through Jira Advanced Roadmap for both the predefined issues, predefined bulking, or extended via the bulk actions in Jira. And I was going to talk about the fixed versions for feature complete and code lock, which a lot of program managers and project managers use, and release managers. And those are really fixed versions that you can add, and they will show us dots here. If you want to break that down, your project into like not only just the final end date, but you have some milestones that are internal, like the FC, feature complete milestone, use the fixed versions and it will just show up as a blue dot. And then you can map all your epics to hit that fixed version as well. But that's a more deeper conversation. So I'm going to park that to take any random questions that people have. Mark, to your point.
Okay, so I've asked people to actually raise their hand in Zoom such that I can bring them in. That's great. Actually, I was quite surprised at that, seeing all those different types of actual preset things that enable you to just do a quick bulk change. That's really nice. Instead of actually having to go through all the actual steps. So, and then finding the field somewhere on the page or doing a Control F. So far, I've got no extra questions. If somebody does have a question, please raise your hand right now and we'll bring you straight in.
Otherwise, Ralph, this is like an indication that you've done a superb job. Everybody understood.
If everybody understood, I put everybody asleep. I don't know which one of the two.
No. This was amazing. Actually, I'm sure that judging by how much comment was going in the chat, I think everybody really enjoyed it and sparked some questions and some thoughts about how to do certain things. So it was nice. It was a very community effort on the back end.
Yeah, it's great. The community and you, the leaders of the community are doing an amazing job. So thank you so much. One thing I noticed that nobody has asked me, which is okay. I'm skidding along. Is that along the risk management topic that I mentioned earlier on the fixed version, these warnings here, which is yellow, you notice all those triangles? Just for those program managers and project managers and Scrum Masters who want to manage the risk early, Jira Advanced Roadmap will do a reasonably good job at raising these triangles, which means that there's a risk there, and it will tell you what that risk is. And the font is kind of small, so you may not be able to look at the details, but also it gives you an idea as to how to resolve that risk, right as you hover. And if I have multiple risks within my epic, once you resolve that risk, it will keep that triangle alive with the new risk that you may have. You can also click on the warnings button and it will show you the risks that you have and what issues are affected by those risks. And these are all hyperlinked. So you can actually see what those issues are, and you can go into a fishing expedition here, or you could go directly from here into Jira and fix them in Jira as well. So just know that there is these triangles are your friend. Anyways, oh, Hanu raised his hand, so I'm going to park. Hanu.
Yeah, thank you, Ralph. I think these red flags, right? Always a turn of management, always asking, why is this red flag? Are we on track or not? So is this because of insights? What is that? There is a tool called Actionable Agile, right? That Jira is driving that data implementations across the world. So is it coming because of that? They are pulling the data. Is it one of the insights coming from the actionable insights?
It depends where like in my instance, in my case, in my fake project, I'm the product owner, I'm the VP, I'm everything here in this project. I'm using, for example, a lot of these flags is because I am leveraging this field called the due date, which is a field in Jira. It's a date field. And if I am the product manager, for example, I use the due date field to articulate to my engineering team, you know, we have a feature complete milestone where all the features need to be done, right? But as a product manager, I would love if it would be great if I can get this, for example, this particular epic here by a certain date so that I can play with it at the epic level, not the story level, and give some observations or, you know, take some notes. My due date right now is set in September 15th. So it's way long overdue. So I can just update the due date into the future and notice that my triangle. So it depends on how you're leveraging the fields. To your point, some of those warnings will pop up based on actionables that are driven by mainly date fields. And if I happen to have other issues, like in this case, this one epic, that was the only issue that there was. But if I clear that issue and there are other issues underneath, the triangle will persist, just to let you know, as a program manager or project manager or Scrum Master or release manager, that, hey, there's still some other issues underneath that need to be looked into. And by expanding it, you'll see the bandbox to the other issues that is related to.
Okay, I hope that's answered your question, Hanyu.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We actually had another question drop in earlier, just as we were thinking that we had no questions. And I said I'd squeeze it in, and then we're going to close. Are the story points for epics an epic automatic sum of all story points of the stories contained by the epic?
The answer is yes. The sum that you see up here, that squiggly line, it's a sum of the stories that have been story pointed, right? Because right now there's some stories here that have not story pointed, and it will keep track of them. And hence the reason why I suggested earlier that a good practice, and this is not a Jira thing, this is just a practice that I have learned over the years of failures, is that if you can get into the discipline of creating epics that are discrete and stories that are discrete to a release, then by applying the fixed version, you can rely that these story points and even the progress reports here are accurate to the epic as it relates to that release. What happens is that normally people create these epics that contains the stories for multiple releases. So it's like multi-release extended. And so, yeah, it will summarize the story points and it will summarize the progress, but it will not be in the context of that particular fixed version because you have mixed fixed versions in it. And so therefore you cannot rely on that number accurately to say, yeah, we are, 27% done. If you mix everything there from here to eternity, it would be 27% of all the work that you're planning to do into 2025.
And not 27% for the actual release.
Exactly. And the way you get around that is by carving out epics that are specific to the release with the stories that are specific for that release into that discrete epic.
Great. I hope that actually answers your question, John. It was certainly a great question. Really interesting to see those progress indicators. Okay, great. Thank you for the reply, John. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you so much, Ralph, for actually
Absolutely.
bringing this second session to everybody. Look forward to seeing everybody next week again. Same time, same day, same place, Scrum Masters of the Universe, and a special thank you to Angie for being there and helping me. Thank you very much, Angie. Okay,
Yeah.
everybody.
Team effort. Great session.
Take care, everybody. Goodbye and
Bye,
Scrum
everyone.
on.
Right on.
Bye-bye.